Aloha. This video I wanted to I just started watching this Adam Conover. He does the Adam Ruins Everything YouTube videos. I think he's on like TrutherTV too, television. Has a show on, that show is on there as well. But this Joe Rogan podcast in particular, I haven't watched the whole thing. I just saw this one video, because this is, and I only saw the first like 2/3 of it. This is a good example of the transition psychologically that the system is trying to make from the old patriarchal world to the new age, new like women empowerment focused, like human psyche. And this women empowerment human psyche is not at the it's at the expense of the power of the man, and that is to give the illusion of things changing, to give the illusion that things are getting better because you're switching from male to female or man to woman, in reference to power. But that's the thing. The problem is not the power is in man's hands and not in woman's hands. The problem is that the compatibility nature of the man and the woman has been disrupted and destroyed by the racist white supremacy societal mind control programs that stem down from Greco-Roman mind controls, and even beyond that, it goes into Egypt. But over that, the main thing is to focus on in this video, now that most people who watch these videos understand the power grid going back centuries, we're on right now, is that now that we know that, how is the power grid shifting into the next control grid? And what I've been saying is that the system is trying to soften up men to make it look like it's softening up the control grid. It's softening up the, it's trying to make it look like men are changing evolution through evolution, and that women are changing through evolution, and that is natural. But what's happening is that it's not changing naturally through evolution. People are changing as they are adjusting to the control grid as a whole. And that's what the system as a whole, both Adam and Joe and anybody else in the mainstream media, they will never address. The same way in the truther community, truthers won't address the system of racism and white supremacy, because largely most people don't know about it. But beyond that, subconsciously protecting that system protects their creature comforts, like what they are used to. So largely in the truther community, there's a fear of losing what is comfortable to them. So subconsciously and subconsciously, people are trying to protect that old system but make it get better, like change the system. As I've said years ago on this channel, this system was never meant, it was never designed to be for the people. It was meant to do exactly what it's doing today, to enslave the people and have a small group of people at the top and the masses down at the bottom powering the machine that is this establishment. So in order to keep the masses powering the machine of the establishment for the smaller group of people at the top of the pyramid, the masses have to remain ignorant and also have to remain in a space of thinking that things are changing. Neely Fuller Jr. referenced this as the psychology of refinement. So thinking that things are changing, thinking that things are getting better. But actually, the system of racism and white supremacy is actually refining itself. It's getting better under the guise of the system getting better. So the system is getting more complex and better at enslaving you when it makes you think that the system is getting better overall. So when these discussions happen between meathead, monkey-minded people like Joe Rogan, who are out there he's out there to represent that old world type of thinking, and then you have the new world type of thinking, which is this Adam Conover, who represents I'm going to use these terms just to give an example to use, and then I'll expand it a little further. He represents like the beta male. So the beta male is the answer to the alpha male in mainstream media, no different than the angry, strong, powerful, politically engaged woman, particularly white woman, is the answer to the out of control, crazy white man in politics, in society, in culture, on television, in Hollywood, all that. This is how it's being played. So let me say that again so people can understand what I'm talking about. To make it look like things are changing, you have the beta male who is going after the alpha man or the alpha male on television. And this is not true alpha beta males. These are alpha beta males within the system of racism, white supremacy. And keep in mind that system will not be acknowledged in this entire interview. They will consistently keep it on science versus politically correct new age thinking. This is what's happening right now. Old science, old white sponsored science versus new age, softer spoken, more intellectually tuned in, more sensitive males. So this is what the new age agenda needs in order to sell in that one world order, we're all one. It needs to soften up the men in order to, and what do you think? The same thing is happening on the streets with Nipsey Hussle unifying the gangs. So this is softening up the men, emasculating the men, softening everything up, and then throwing the women out of whack by thinking they need to be like crazy-eyed, like what's her name, AOC, Ocasio-Cortez. Every time I see a thumbnail of her fucking eyes are crazy. She has these crazy ass eyes, like she's gonna fucking like. Anyway, it's like this out of control, out of control nature that is completely a side effect to this system of RWS in many different ways. But keep in mind, like I said, the people who are talking about this, they have to protect their investment. Their investment is the establishment. So Joe Rogan protects the establishment by pushing the narrative, this ancient ass narrative of, women are attracted to big muscles and tall men, like the same way, and Adam says this too, that was the same kind of mindset for slavery back then when they said, white people have bigger brains and they should just enslave the beastly brown people, black and brown people of the whole world. So, through eugenics, they are justified for genociding and colonizing the entire world. That same mentality goes down into what Joe was talking about. Well, are you telling me that women are not attracted to men with big muscles? And I'll get into this in a second because he's real slick with his psychology. He says that, and then he has to add a little bit of complexity to his question when Adam basically doesn't tuck his tail. He says, "No, I don't agree with you, Joe Rogan. I don't give a fuck if you have millions of people on your podcast. You're selling some old racist white supremacy ass psychology to your millions of people, and I won't sit here and allow you to use me as a jump off point to add credibility to your bullshit ass musclehead monkey minded belief systems." So this is that fake fight that is put out there. You see how, it looks like I'm on Adam's team. No, I am not on Adam's team. I haven't even finished this video. What I'm telling you is that this is a fixed fight. Adam versus Joe, alpha males versus beta males. What's gonna happen in this discussion? And then, so that's the whole thing. Who the fuck set the fight up? And what are they not talking about? That's what's more important here. Who set this fight up? Who gave these assholes their platform? And what are they not talking about? So they're not talking about, they're always, so this is the thing, what are they always talking about? And what are they always not talking about? They're always talking about, they're always talking about science. Like, science is the thing. Like, and Adam breaks that down. He says, I simply won't just, believe everything that is just readily accepted by people out there. And then that's when Joe Rogan has to readjust his, he's like, what are you saying? Given a situation where you have everything's equal, the men are smart, the men, are equally successful, and then one group of men are not really strong and muscular, and the other group of men are really strong and muscular. Who are the women going to go after? The equally smart, strong, and muscular ones, right? Yeah, because of reproduction. See, he didn't say that in the beginning question. And beyond that, it presupposes that, everything is about what he's talking about in reference to relationships. So he really just gives a good example of how shallow he thinks relationships are and interactions are. And they should be. And that's the thing. It's not like he's doing anything any different than what happens on television. It's all about titties and ass and, this shallow ass monkey-minded animalistic approach. But they want to play like they're not animals. This is the thing. They play like they're not animals only by words. It's like, yeah, we evolved from monkeys, but we're not monkeys anymore. We are higher than monkeys. So yeah, anyway, you know what I mean. So let me just play this so you can see what I'm talking about. I want to go through this whole thing because I want to break it down. Hopefully the video holds out. I really want to break down each little thing that comes up, but keep in mind what I told you. How these individuals are talking to each other is more important than what they're talking about. Joe Rogan is trying to sell a thought, a belief system, and Adam also is selling a belief system, but he's trying to sell it by looking like he's not selling something in the face of somebody who's obviously selling something. So that's what's being told to the masses of people. Think like this. Think like Adam. So Adam is like the aggressive. Adam is like the Bernie Sanders to the Joe Rogan, who represents like a Hillary Clinton or something like that. Like an old ass thinking sort of thing. But you can understand, what do both Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders exist in? They exist in the same system. So, and they're not talking about the psychological implications and the evolutionary implications, like the psychological evolutionary implications of racism, white supremacy. So they'll talk about, how thought psychology has evolved through what they call science, but they won't talk about how psychology has evolved through racism, white supremacy. This is the point that I'm trying to make. Science and internet information, truthers included in that, are doing the same things. They're focusing on what's going on, but they're not going into how what's going on is going on. This is not being done. So what's happening is people are regurgitating all of this nonsense, thinking that things are changing because their basis for change is given to them by the system that is hell-bent on not changing. So they give them little pebbles of what's changing. So enter in all this Adam Carolla having a discussion with Joe Rogan, and he doesn't tuck his tail. He seems to not tuck his tail. He seems to not, give in to Joe Rogan like all the other people that go on his channel and just kiss his ass. And he's using his intelligence and his intellect. So, 1 second. Forgot where I was. I'm just gonna play this video. Yeah, keep in mind how these individuals are talking. This is a fixed fight. It's a fixed fight to make you focus on the content that they are talking about without acknowledging and going in analyzing the arena that they're in. The arena that they're in is designed to keep the conversation on science and this mainstream version of critical thought. That's what's happening. Adam Conover represents the mainstream version of critical thought, just like Bernie Sanders represents a mainstream version of progressive change. So the mainstream version of critical thought is the segue into the New World Order, New Age version of critical thought. Like this New Age version of, what men are, what women are, what society is, what religion is, what spirituality is, what food is, what's right for the air, what's right for the water. So like I said, the system has played the villain for so long. In order for it to change into maintaining power, it has to, over the next centuries, it has to go from selling fear to selling hope, selling evolution, selling, all this, whatever it thinks is amazing to people. So once that is accepted as the movement, then you will just have the followers who will just follow on into the next agenda. So this is why I said it's more important to focus on the how and the why than the what and the who, because people will follow what and who all the way into another mind control program, thinking that they're telling the truth, thinking that they are sharing the truth. But because they haven't been aware or exposed to the who and the how, or the how and the who, or the how and the why, they think that their max out of what and who is the truth. So this is what I'm saying. That's the threshold. The threshold is between the what and the who consciousness, between those two, and the how and the why. The how and the why is getting into the systems, the psychologies that's going on, that creates all of these, the chemtrail, the individual things that are fucked up. How did they get the power? That's the threshold. How did they get the power to cause chemtrails, to genocide, to fuck up your education, to fluoridate the water, to create this impoverished mentality, to install monkey evolution, to install heliocentrism? How did the system get to that point to convince the masses to accept that as their reality? That is where you're going to get into the actual power grid and start disassembling it. If you're just bitching and complaining about, chemtrails are in the sky, and if we don't come together and start yelling about it, then, what's going to happen? Nothing. It's the same thing's going to happen. Same thing. Same thing with like protesting. You're asking the system to change. So-called white people who have been benefiting from this system for so long, they really don't they don't think the system needs to change. They think this is a fucking game. They think revolution is like a fucking toy. This is why it's so it was so what's it called, like laughable for people like Mark and Patricia in the flat earth community, how they were wearing costumes and just joking about chemtrails and all this other stuff. They don't live in Flint. They don't live in East Oakland. They're not exposed to this shit. So they think this is like a fucking movie. They are an example of being desensitized by movies and television shows and the news. Those are the people. They will be seen in the years in the future, the studies in the future. They will be seen as the people who have been who have had their consciousness desensitized down to nothing. So they do not even realize that they are still enslaved. In fact, they are protecting that enslavement program. They will be seen as those individuals. In fact, they are already being seen right now, because there's not that many traffic on this channel. Only the people that come to this channel are seeing that. Out of the channel, I'm not saying only this channel, but other channels see it. But what I'm saying is that not many channels are really going into the how and the why of these mind controls. In fact, the entire internet is in the high 90th percentile of being inundated with what and who consciousness. Prove me wrong. Somebody prove me wrong in the comment section. Tell me I'm lying right there when I say that the internet and your conspiracy theories, your truth communities, your conscious communities, your new age communities, whatever you want to call them, they are all in the 90th percentile. On average, they are in the high 90th percentiles of only talking about what the mainstream is doing, what side effects, it's all what's going on and who is involved in that what. It very seldom gets, and if it gets into the how and the why, it's for a quick second. It's like, oh yeah, because of this. and you know why people do that is because they haven't done the homework themselves. They always, oh yeah, quickly, yeah, it's because of this. So they try to like co-sign on the work that other people do. Say, yeah, well, we know it's about this, but you know, I'm not going to talk about that. Ha 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 ha. Well, a lot of people don't fucking do that. They laugh it off because that takes personal work to be done. So let me get this done. I don't want to get too sidetracked. I want to keep this video going. Hopefully you can hear it.
The Joe Rogan experience.
There's that.
Another one people got.
There's that. First of all, there's that monkey. Boom. And you know transitions for people who break down the mainstream media. You watch ESPN commercials, specifically ESPN. The transitions, you see those where they're like sucking you into another dimension with their transitions from one commercial or from one thing to another thing. That does something to your mind. So that's in those are the algorithms within the science of racism, white supremacy. So this is the science of racism, white supremacy. Those transitions, this transition you just saw, just like the other video, the last video I did with Alex Trebek. What the fuck is Alex Trebek's face doing on there? Well, he represents a thought. He represents smartness. He represents safety. He represents comfort. He represents television, which represents all of that. It's safety, comfort, you know, everything that makes you feel nice and good inside. But particularly Alex Trebek represents intelligence. So people who are playing crossword puzzles are intelligent. They are knowledgeable of facts and so on and so forth to some degree. So you think the system is just going to miss out on any opportunity to sell something to them? No, of course not. And also program them. So what they do is they get people that you trust. So like when you ask somebody, do you trust Alex Trebek? And they're like, fuck no, I don't know Alex Trebek. But when you see pictures, you say, oh, would you trust this man? Like, of course, because they've been programmed to trust people like that their whole lives. And the same thing goes for, you know, the races and all that. So I've been through that. I'm not going to go through that.
Mad about this is weirdly the one we got the biggest reaction to, and to the extent that I'm a little hesitant talking about it because it always starts a shitstorm every time I do.
Vaccines?
No, actually we've not done a whole one on vaccines, but we really should because it's coming back. I used to think that vaccines was like
never went anywhere
as a topic, and like we've gone through it. It is really
vaccines never went anywhere. So when you have authorities of intellect like Adam Conover, say something like vaccines, you know, are coming back, it makes you think like, oh, like it's the vaccine questioning is unstable in some kind of way because he says so many smart things. So that little bit of unsureness of him by saying, oh yeah, you know, well, we kind of forgot about vaccines, but you know, they're coming back into the big screen and we're gonna have to talk about them soon. That gives you this kind of like, oh well, maybe you know, he's gonna be cool with vaccines, or maybe this, maybe that. But you know, anyway, that's just another way, another version of how this stuff affects you.
It is really back, and it is big. But no, we did one on alpha males. We did an episode about dating, and we did one on how the idea of the alpha male doesn't exist in humans. Like if you talk to any anthropologist, any biologist, any sociologist, right, and be like, are humans organized in a social relationship where there's alphas and betas? They'll be like, no, what are you talking about? This is an unscientific idea, right? And we just did something laying that out in the context of like people who are, oh, my type is I like alphas, right? Well, there's no such thing actually, you know. humans are you're dominant in some situations, not in others, right? It's an overly simplistic way of looking at human relationships. And I thought that was a pretty simple, straightforward thing. I was like, this is just a bit of pseudoscience that you hear people talk.
Overly simplistic way of looking at human relationships. That is exactly what the Joe Rogan science-sponsored shit that he's getting ready to defend. Joe Rogan's bumbling. He's boiling right now. That is the definition of it's overly simplified. And that overly simplified shit, like heliocentrism. Oh yeah, this is happening because this, and oh yeah, oh we get it. Oh, here's a little ball. Here, play with this little ball. Yeah, that's a Earth. That's just like us. It makes sense, right? Because it's simple. Yeah, okay. So that mentality has been sold to the masses for hundreds of years, including all up in racism, white supremacy, eugenics, and definitely, obviously, within heliocentrism. So this is another good example of what I was explaining before. This fake version of critical thought that is being sponsored by the New Age and this new style of thinking, which Adam Conover is smack dab in the middle of. Now that he's been there, but he's confirmed as another part of this scenario now that they go on Joe Rogan's podcast speaking. You can see what they're really about. Like, they don't have predetermined scripts necessarily. They might in some kind of way, but I'm saying it's just the individual in comparison to their TV show. They have a whole script. They have actors. They have they can cut. They can edit. They can do all these things, but they have their subjects. Interviews like this, live streams and stuff like that, it's a little more loose, so you're going to get more of the person involved. And that's what the system wants. Like Will Smith having a YouTube channel, the system wants you to think that because they're more personable and more closer to you, that what they're saying is more real, more honest, more truthful. And then once that happens, it becomes more real to you. It becomes your truth, a deeper version of your truth. What's more truthful? Something that you kind of believe in that comes on CNN or MSNBC, or something that you kind of believe in that comes on a podcast from an individual. Like it matters more. Like it matters more to you. It doesn't matter that the rest of the world is seeing it. Obviously, the mainstream media is full of shits, and that's where a lot of people are seeing things now. But once you get to the individual, that's when you're gonna start to hear a little bit, and that he'll hear a little bit more fringe type of perspectives, and that's where you're gonna see that's that sweet spot that the system wants to get people at. It's like, oh yeah, catch them right there. Don't give them too much information, but catch them right where they trust Will Smith. Catch them right where they trust Adam Conover, and then adjust what they're saying and sell it back to the people with our own narrative, with our own. And this is what Joe Rogan represents, and this is what he's getting ready to do after he tries to attack and bring down what he's saying.
Out, and people went ballistic on the internet because people have sort of like built a edifice of ideology in their minds about, like, there's alphas, there's betas, I'm an alpha, this is what an alpha's like, this is what a beta's like, you know.
See, this alpha beta discussion is also very much in the racism white supremacy program, because the idea of white people taking over the world, they represent like, they won't say this out loud, but in their science, in what Joe Rogan's getting ready to defend, or try to defend, white people overall, the way they colonize the world, they represent this out of control, fake ass alpha male, and they use that to they use that to defend their empire. They say, we are evolutionarily, like biologically, through evolutionary biology, we are the peak of humanity. We are the head alpha male. We are the peak alpha human, because we have dominated the entire world. That is scientifically proven. So the alpha beta discussion is beneficial to the actual, like, defending the alpha beta discussion is defending monkey evolution. So, and defending monkey evolution is defending the scientific interpretation, so-called scientific interpretations of this false human reality, the false heliocentric reality, the false, like, all that shit. All that racism, white supremacy sponsored so-called intellect goes into these conversations. Alpha, beta. Well, what are they really talking about? They're talking about power, control, dominance. Once you hear Joe Rogan try to defend it, you'll see. And that's why he's defending it. He's not defending it because he thinks he's a cool alpha male and he sees, you know, pieces of shit beta males out there and they're, through politically correctness, trying to take over the world. See, Joe, in this discussion, Joe Rogan represents Donald Trump. The old sort of, like, we're strong, we're this, and Adam Conover represents, like, a mixture between, like, Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders or something like that. Like a soft man who's really progressive, but, you know, is mostly tuned into what women are talking about because they don't have this old masculine, out of control alpha bullshit going on. That's the mainstream story that's being sold to people. And people are eating it up because they don't think for themselves. They'll just take whatever they get spoon fed to them.
Away the words.
Yeah.
They're clearly men who are more aggressive and athletic and dominant and more confident, and then men who are introverted and shy and more nervous and anxious. And there's a scale
in some situations, you know,
social situations.
Yeah,
and that's what we're talking about, right?
In social, yeah, but your social situation could change based on what situation you're in. You know what I mean?
They could, but like an athletic, confident male is always going to be an athletic.
Listen to the words
male,
he
and
uses.
An introverted, anxious male who has problems with social anxiety is going to be the same. That's who that person is.
I don't think so necessarily.
See the society that he's talking about. He's talking about in, like, business settings and out in like the racism, white supremacy, world culture. He's talking about those types of settings, and they have to keep the dialogue in that sort of that setting perspective to maintain the overall mind control, like the control of the entire the macro control. It has to be like you can't talk about let's see, what's a good one? It's the same. Oh, this is a perfect example. The good example of this in comparison to how they keep the conversation based upon, oh, and this is a mirror image of what Joe Rogan is doing. The same way the American dream sort of mainstream mentality used Babe Ruth, called Babe Ruth the king of baseball, or whatever, the king of the sultan of sort, like he's the king of everything baseball, right? They made movies about this dude. So what they won't tell you is that Babe Ruth was playing baseball when there was still a Negro league. So they didn't even allow certain people to play with Babe Ruth. So the best players in baseball in the whole fucking world were not even allowed to play baseball with or against Babe Ruth. And what did white people do? They named that motherfucker king of baseball, even though everybody knows he's not the king of anything, because they were throwing the ball at like 60 fucking miles an hour. They were throwing, their fastballs were like at 70 miles an hour. And he was just hitting it out like he was in fucking Little League. He was this out of shape, piece of shit ass white guy who just had a big sort of alpha kind of personality, and that's the best that they could do. So they had to create a major league, which is what they did, and they had to create their own king of that major league to make it, to overshadow the Satchel Pages and all the other people that were in the Negro leagues. So this is the same thing that's happening today. This is the same bullshit that's happening today. They are controlling the dialogue and naming themselves kings and queens. So the same way Major League Baseball named Babe Ruth the king of baseball, even though he was playing in kindergarten and not playing against, he wasn't playing against, Willie Mays, Satchel Paige, like all these, Willie Mays a little later. But, you know what I'm saying. He was basically in kindergarten, and then they put him on MTV and made him king of baseball. And we're like, wait a second, that's a whole baseball league full of just white people. Is he really the king of anything? No, absolutely not. So now this is why you have like Hank Aaron nowadays. He beat the shit out of. He's the real king of baseball, but you won't really hear like they put. He's still alive, so they just put him on television here and there to kind of cover their shit. But when he dies, they're gonna put this all out there. They're gonna put that out there. They're gonna say, look, Hank Aaron actually hit all those home runs against the top of the world, the people in the top of the world. I was still racist back then, and they still did all that back then, but Hank Aaron hit the shit out of the ball when he was facing actual pitchers, real fastballs, real curveballs, real athletes, not these recreational baseball players that Babe Ruth was playing against. That's fucking bullshit. So this is the same thing that Adam and Joe are doing right now. They are talking about alphas and betas in a white only setting, in a white only league. So they're talking about how alphas and betas exist, or this is what they're doing. They're talking about alpha males in a white-only baseball league. They're not talking about what alphas and betas, they're not talking about the white league itself. They're not talking about the segregation. They're not talking about, how the white league affects the players. They're not talking about how the white league affects society. They're not talking about how the white league, you see what I'm saying? Like they're not addressing that. They only can talk about the statistics of the players within the white league of baseball. And then they will constantly talk about, they'll make a sports center, an ESPN, out of the white baseball conversations, political white baseball conversations. They will constantly play the top 10 plays of white league baseball evolutionary psychology. They'll play that story until they can't play the story anymore. And in order to maintain that power, they will continue to just distract as much as possible and evolve the story over time. So that's just a really good example. Like this is a good example of how even in the truther community. See, the truther community is the league itself. They're talking about the truth within the white league of evolutionary truth. You're in white league baseball and white league truth. But these people are not getting into the macro storyline.
So when we're talking about alphas, right? Mm-hmm. In animals, what is that? It's a social hierarchy, right?
So this is the thing that they always have to resort to avoid the system of racism, white supremacy existing. They jump over racism, white supremacy, and go into animal talk. So they're like, oh yeah, we evolved from monkeys. Let's not talk about the psychological installations into the people. Let's jump over that and go straight to animals. Why? Because that's more universal. You can say it's more like we're more the same because monkeys and all that other stuff. That's why they always go there. This is why Joe holds it there, because he can hold the discussion. He can filibuster the discussion to make it look like he's on the same page as Adam, and Adam will spend most of his time trying to get back onto the actual discussion, because Adam's way smarter than Joe. So Adam has to both try to not offend people and also try to get the conversation. He has to add more intelligence to the story because Joe's so fucking stupid. So it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time and effort for Adam to put the words together and the thoughts together to both teach Joe, or make it look like he's teaching Joe, and also his dumbass followers, to teach them what's going on without being offensive and, you know, all these other things. That, what I'm saying is that takes time. Joe knows this. Joe will play that card because Joe is fucking dumb as fuck.
So let's take away that word. I mean, what people are using to describe when they're saying alphas and betas, they're saying like confident, strong, secure people, and people that are anxious and not confident.
So if you're trying to say, hey, like, it's good to be confident, it's not so great to be anxious, like that's fine, right? But when people talk about alpha males and beta males, right, they're specifically bringing in the language of like evolution, of biology, of zoology, of evolutionary psychology, you know, and they'll start saying stuff like, well, there's alphas and there's betas, and women are hardwired to be attracted to the alpha, you know, because that's what it's like in nature. Like, they'll be using that language, right? And so what we're pointing out is that's not scientific, right?
It's not scientific, but it is true that women are hardwired to be attracted to confident, athletic men.
I don't know if I agree with that.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't think that women look at like pro athletes and like big, strong, athletic men, and you don't think they're drawn to that for evolution?
You see how he says it's not scientific, but it is true. See, these are the word games that assholes, dumbass assholes like him play. It's not scientific, but it is true. And then he's going to explain everything and then jump back to science, which in his case is the same thing. True and science is the same thing to him. But when he's trying to convince people of things, he has to use the different words. So he'll say, yeah, it's not this, but it is true. And then here is why it's true. Because science says it's true. Watch.
Evolutionary reasons?
No, I don't actually. I think that...
Okay, do you think that men are drawn to women with small waists and big hips and large
evolutionary
breasts
science.
You know, I think that's an easy... I think what that is that's an easy intuition to come to if you're like looking at the way people behave, right? But one of the things about evolutionary...
See, and he says it's an easy thing to come to when you're looking at the way people behave. And they're looking at the way people behave through the eyes that only want to see what they want to see. They only want to see Babe Ruth as the king of baseball. They only want to see, because as Babe Ruth is king of baseball, Babe Ruth is the king of athleticism. Babe Ruth is the king of alpha males. He's the king of... As long as Babe Ruth is the king of baseball, the American dream is the king of athletics in the United States. And there's no question. And if that remains to be, then so-called white people remain to be the kings and queens of humanity.
Psychology is, it's the most common mistake to look at the way that people do behave and say the reason we behave that way is because evolution says that's the best way, right? That's their argument. For instance, I'll give you an example. That's the argument that was, arguments like that were used, for instance, to justify slavery, right? That like, oh, because, you know, whites and blacks have this...
Watch how Joe gets around this.
In American society, that's the way it was intended. That's how nature intended it to be, right?
But that's a giant leap. We're just talking about like the shapes of bodies. Like men universally are attracted to a certain...
See how he tries to avoid that conversation and get back to it? They were talking about the shapes of body back then. That's why they were doing the shapes of skulls and the shapes of mongoloids, the shapes of, the shapes of African heads, the shapes of, you know, people from the Americas, the shapes of white people. And then they said, oh yeah, because they're designed like this, scientifically, white people are smarter than, you know, these people over here. And what did they do to judge what their smartness was from? Based upon the intelligence of how they interacted in racism, white supremacy, education. That's what determines their IQ. So they set up the game to benefit them. The same way they labeled Babe Ruth as the king of baseball in a white-only Major League Baseball setting. So this is a side effect. All these Joe Rogans and Adam Conovers, they are Babe Ruths of their own white baseball leagues. This is what's happening. They are their own Babe Ruths in their own settings now, because now you just don't have Major League Baseball. You have YouTube, you have the Joe Rogan Experience, you have Twitter, you have Facebook, you have Snapchat, you have all these leagues that people can be Babe Ruths in. And all those Babe Ruths are saying the same story, because if they veer from the story, they will cease to be Babe Ruths, because the league will kick them out. They will get kicked out of their league if they don't tell the story that the league wants to be told.
Shape of bodies. There's men that are attracted to different ones, and
I don't think men are
vary.
universally attracted to the same
People vary,
body.
but that hourglass shape
People
has been
vary.
throughout
People vary.
time something that men are attracted to.
I think that hourglass shape is something.
So he's talking about like attractiveness, and that's evolution, and he's giving you the animal definition of humanity, which is what science does. It's like your attractiveness. First of all, he's de-evolving your interpretations of what relationships are by making it all about, you know, the sex and the attractiveness and all that other shit, and then formalizing it by saying that this is the only thing that matters. What is of the physical is more important than what is of attractiveness to the spiritual, and what's attractive psychologically. This is what Joe Rogan is defending when he's saying this against Adam Conover, who's like, wait a second, attractiveness is a lot deeper than, titties and ass, you fucking idiot. And I'm not going to sit here and allow you to say otherwise, because that sells, sells tickets to kindergartners, people in monkey evolution kindergartner conscious. No, this is what's happening. You are selling an old version of thinking, and because your old muscle-minded, muscle-head ass friends get a lot of kickback from you selling that old, muscles or everything mentality, I'm not going to sit around here and just let you talk that old bullshit. You represent an old ass mentality, an old psychology, and that shit's dead. And, most people go on his podcast and he can just barrel over anybody because they're trying to get something from him. But Adam is smarter than Joe. Obviously, all of his viewers know that. And he can't play that game, so he has to hold the line whenever he can. But he's still going to tuck his tail and just go with whatever Joe says.
Throughout our recent cultural memory, that we tell each other that men are attracted to, right? That's what we're told.
See, that's that we shit again. Who's we? We told who? What is this we they're saying? We told us to be attracted to what? It's not we. Who's the we behind? Who owns all the music industry? Who owns the banks? Who owns Hollywood? Who owns politics? What race is that we? So this is what they're avoiding. This is some obvious ass shit. This is not we. See, Hollywood and Western psychology is spread across the world. This is why I focus on so-called white people so much, because this is racism, white supremacy. The psychology of whiteness is across the world. You have people in Singapore who are practicing racism, white supremacy because of how they've been programmed. They love white people and hate themselves. That is white privilege. That is white supremacy. How the fuck did that happen? So if it happened all the way over there, how do you think it's happening over here? Way more intense. This is why they have to make all these podcasts and distractive videos and make it look like everything is amazing and awesome to distract you from this shit.
From an early age to this is the sort
So that's the thing. They won't talk about it. They will talk about the side effects to the cancer, but they will never talk about the cancer. They will allude to the cancer by saying, we generate these ideas that make us think we like people because of this, but they won't say who that we is and where that we originates. It ain't people in East Oakland running MSNBC. It ain't Junebug from down the street who's running Fox News. It ain't like Felicia, who is the CEO of CNN. That's not happening. It's a very definite type of psychology that is happening that's not being spoken about by these talking heads.
That men are attracted to, and so a lot of men end up adopting that, right? But I don't think that deep down that's how men naturally are, you know?
Really?
Yeah.
So this is the discussion when he said, really? He's dumbing down people. He's talking to his. This is a good example of who he's talking to, of how dumb his following is, and how you know, I don't want to say not dumb Adam's following is, but you know, more intelligent in some kind of way. But ultimately, that you can see they're still bullshit. It's still bullshit. It's still only going to a certain degree, but you can see more so how the way they're responding to each other controls the masses. It controls a huge group of people. And you can really also see how dumb Joe is. When he says, really? Really? You don't really think, you know, people are...
But that doesn't make any sense to me. That's so non.
It makes no sense.
Well, I'm all about things that are not.
Where do you think?
Do you honestly believe that Joe cannot at all comprehend what Adam is saying right now? Okay, so if he is lying and he can comprehend what he's saying, why is he saying what he's saying? And why is he so against what he's saying? Why is he acting like he's totally oblivious to what Adam's saying?
It started. Where do you think this narrative of men being attracted to the woman with large breasts and a small waist and a big ass, where do you think that started? Because this is like evolutionary biology is pretty much settled on the idea that the reason why is the large hips would indicate that the woman would be easier to give birth, having large...
See, this goes into why some black people or black men in particular are attracted to white women. You don't think it has anything to do with white women being inundating the mainstream media? You don't think it has anything to do with white women, half-naked ass white women being put in bathing suits every 5 seconds on commercials, selling you dripping ketchup and mustard down their fucking face, selling you burgers, making your mouth salivate? You don't think it's because they have white women as the superheroes in every fucking superhero movie, taking over everything now? White women in politics, white women in movies, white women everywhere. See, they won't ever talk about that. That shit will never be mentioned because they always have to talk about the other things to distract from that conversation.
Breasts and a large ass would indicate that she has, she's fertile.
See, this is science.
Ample fat storage.
See, there's two distractions. Not to talk about the other stuff that is being inundated into your reality, and also to overly talk about so-called science. But this is just RWS science. This is not real science.
In the right places, if she's going to be pregnant and carry children, there's all these like evolutionary biology reasons.
All this
why people
science.
attract to certain things.
That's his way of saying scientific facts. He's saying evolutionary biology reasons. That's his way of saying scientific facts. And anytime he's saying that, and he won't say that, I mean, with other people that he could punk, he'll say, there's scientific facts that say that women are attracted to ... But with Adam, who can easily rip this dude apart, he has to like tippy-toe around this shit because he's dumb as fuck. It's a tippy-toe around it and say, oh, yo, evolutionary, observations or whatever the hell he said, which is another way of saying scientific fact.
Woman would be attracted to a tall, muscular, handsome man, good genetics, very strong and confident, can take care of her. All these things are based on evolutionary biology. So I don't understand why you think these are
evolutionary biology,
cultural artifacts.
So my question.
So he gets his power from evolutionary biology and evolutionary biologists. So that evolutionary biologists exist. He doesn't have to actually know what he's talking about. He just has to regurgitate what the evolutionary biologists say.
This is an assumption that we, the public, make about how evolutionary biology works, right?
Well, it's more of a thing that we sort of agree on.
It's science. It's facts. See, that's what he's
there's
saying there.
The public that this is true. I don't know if it's a scientific idea.
See, now he gets to it.
I've had conversations with evolutionary biologists. biologists who explained.
Now he said, see, they were skirting around it. They were like, oh, this is people saying this. Oh no, oh science. Oh, you're trying to you mean scientists? And that's when he says, I don't know if this is a scientist fact. And then boom, that's when Joe says, it is a scientific fact.
The reason why men are attracted to certain shapes and why women are attracted to certain shapes. This is sort of, I mean, this is science.
There it is.
In a way, the reason why
you see how he's
tall men are muscular and confident is because that.
Swap these words out with this. The reason why white people dominate the world is because white people are statistically smarter than everybody else in the world. That's the same topic. So the same way he references evolutionary biologists, his style of approach references evolutionary racists. That's the point. Evolutionary racists are ingrained in the scientific community. And that science is inherently against everything that is natural to what predates the so-called New World, the people of the New World, of the Old World, like the indigenous people, the people who are in relationship with nature, and so on and so forth. So this is why they have to resort to their science all the time, their churches all the time, their scientific churches all the time, because that is their bread and butter. That is what gives them their alpha status. This is another part of this alpha beta conversation. The ways that white people have become alpha in the eyes of people is because of science. What he is trying to protect. His so-called science is what made them alpha. And now that you're attacking the science, you're attacking their alpha status. And when you're attacking their alpha status, they have to attack you.
Is what's always saved you throughout history.
I mean,
it totally makes sense.
So this is why, since their alpha status is being attacked, they have to call you beta as an attack. So who is their head beta representative? Adam Conover. And this is so the beta's biggest weapon is what? Intelligence. You want facts in reference to this? Watch the Big Bang fucking TV show. That's a whole team of beta males who are only attractive or watchable on television because they're somewhat funny to that kind of audience, but their main attractiveness to them, to each other, to their girlfriends and boyfriends or whatever is intelligence. So on a actor sort of movie screen type of setting, that's how that person is represented. In so-called real life, in this mainstream real life, Adam Conover is like the beta male, like the Big Bang beta male, and this is what he represents on Joe Rogan. So this is how they're attacking him by they're talking about beta males. They're saying he's a beta male, and Joe Rogan is the alpha here, and they have to like, okay, this is the UFC. Joe Rogan's podcast is an intellectual UFC, and it's an intellectual UFC with the intelligence or surrounding the education or the information within the system of racism, white supremacy. So Joe Rogan is the host. He's the MC, the judge of the intellectual UFC of racism, white supremacy.
Well, just because it makes the point of our show, right, is that just because something makes intuitive sense doesn't mean that it's necessarily true, right?
But don't you think that in this case that this is a varied argument? Like, I don't think that's something that you can dismiss.
I don't dismiss it, but I don't assume the truth of it simply because that's what everybody agrees upon, right?
But if you ask girls, like, what are you into? And you say, are you into tall, muscular, confident men who are also nice to you? Jesus
if
Christ,
you ask girls,
it's going to be off the charts. It's going to be like most of them.
Yeah, if you ask girls, because that's what he's talking to. He's talking about, and this is where you get that Freudian slip there. Yeah, this is why I said you're talking to an adolescent mentality. I've said all these videos, people like Joe Rogan are protecting an adolescent mentality. Yeah. When you're talking to girls, girls are going to respond to big muscles and, whatever else on a man. Just like little boys are going to respond to, big titties and a big ass on a woman. That's what little boys and little girls do. Let's listen to what he says again. If you talk to a girl, they're going to say this.
Right.
But if you ask girls, like, what are you into? And you say, are you into tall, muscular, confident?
Because he's a big fucking boy. He's a big fucking little boy. And you see how he says he has to mix in confident in there. You don't have to be big and have muscles to be confident. But you see how he just takes that to put it on there, because that's all they have. Being big don't make you confident. Being big don't make you an alpha. They don't make you shit. But on the internet, it makes, and this is why Joe Rogan has to talk about this shit, because he's like, this is why Owen Benjamin appears to be against him when he talks about his shortness, because Joe Rogan needs to talk about this scientific scientific definitions of what an alpha male is, because he doesn't look like an alpha male. He doesn't sound like an alpha male. He doesn't appear to be an alpha male in any kind of way. When you go to the real definitions of what alpha is in reference to like this whole relationship that's going on with peoples, like, he's also a shorter in stature kind of guy, so he feels like a beta male, but he's perceived on the internet. He seems like, this is the thing with Joe Rogan and why he's insecure. On the internet, Joe Rogan seems 6'5". He seems like he's not 6'5". He seems like he's at least 6 foot tall, but he's like 5'9" or some shit like that. He's like 5'8", 5'7", like, so he's at a big, like, he's got these inner things going on with his own not changing, not evolving, not growing his intellect, his consciousness, his confidence with himself, and how he's perceived by the world. The world sees him as this big sort of guy in UFC and muscles and all this other stuff, but behind that counter, he's like standing behind a step stool. That table is like the size of a step stool. So he's actually a tiny guy, like in every single way. And the only thing that makes him look big in society is what racism, white supremacy has given him. So it's given him science, it's given him the podcast, it's given him UFC, and Adam is basically destroying all of that. And even the people in the truth community is destroying all that. Flat Earth destroys his alpha science comfort, and then Adam is destroying his muscles alpha comfort, and then you have, what was the other one? Just being in real life, just him being a tiny person destroys his like inner confidence. So he has to defend all that shit, and his only defense mechanism is to refer to like evolutionary biologists, scientists. That's where your alpha status comes from, by regurgitating what evolutionary biologists. Get the fuck out of here.
And who are also nice to you. Jesus Christ, it's going to be off the charts. It's going to be like most of them.
I'm really not sure that's the case.
Really?
Yeah.
You think you had like a survey of women, and if the...
Listen how he changes these words now. I'm going to play this again so you can see how he rephrases it. He's going to rephrase it right now in this moment, but let's see what he says first. Again.
Miss.
I don't dismiss it, but I don't assume the truth of it simply because that's what
science
everybody
says.
agrees upon, right?
But if you ask girls, like, what are you into?
Girls.
And you say, are you into tall, muscular, confident men who are also nice to you? Jesus Christ, it's going to be off the charts. It's going to be like most of them.
I'm really not sure that's the case.
Really?
Yeah.
You think you had like a survey of women, and if the men were equally kind and
equally kind. See, he didn't say that before.
Friendly, you don't think that more women would be sexually attracted to these tall, handsome men with great bodies?
I mean, look.
Not only did he not say that before, that first part of it, which makes him look more right and changes the whole fucking discussion, but... Never mind. Let's hear what he says.
I'm not gonna say that like first of all you're positing like a value judgment in it that the bodies are great, right? So like are women
exactly that's it. He's downplaying what attractiveness is by saying this is what attractiveness is all about. It's all about this kindergarten version of attractiveness. What I just said, listed off by science. You don't think people are going to be attracted to that? He's like generalizing this just to defend himself.
attractive bodies, if that's the question, then I would say
dad
of course,
bods are more attractive to women. Study finds some
that's what I'm talking
guy
about.
with a dad bod made
Look, here's
that.
here's something that I was really influenced by. I read.
What do you think of that? What I just said.
He has to
That doesn't make sense to you,
overtalk him.
that women would be attracted to someone.
He's kind of
who's
irritated
fit?
by that too.
Look, I mean, it's a hypothetical, right? Like, certainly athleticism, right, is something that is attractive, right? That's something that many people find attractive, right? Not everybody finds that attractive, and I don't think that we can necessarily reason backwards to like a specific evolutionary relationship,
Exactly.
right? Because the truth of what those evolutionary relationships are is like often a lot more complicated than our immediate intuition about it. And what we're specifically pushing back against in that segment is like the really sort of unscientific,
use of alpha and beta.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, you've got
Unscientific.
people,
So now they're gonna go
just
back.
on internet forums, like sort of doing amateur pseudoscience, right? Saying like, this is how the relationships between men and women.
So that's he's explaining exactly what Joe is doing on he's kind of like passive aggressively like talking shit about Joe, because this is what Joe is actually doing, just putting together his loose sort of interpretations of what alpha and beta are, and then supposedly backing it up by cheap science.
Men are like designed evolutionarily, and we were just pointing out on a very, very simple level, like the alpha and beta social hierarchy theory, right? That like humans are organized in a social hierarchy and alphas are above betas. Not true, right? Even someone who is the person who you posited, right? The person who is athletic and confident, right? The the high school football quarterback, right? Versus the high school football nerd, right? Well, take those two people and then put them in a.
So the same way that the system is trying to make it look like they're fixing the program by saying it's not going against women, saying that men are changing right now, because it's the same way that they're saying like racism is changing, like it's getting better. Why? Because people are being integrated. That's not dealing with the fucking cancer. You're changing the settings of what it looks like to you're changing the settings of what's going on, like the perspectives of what's going on. That's not dealing with the cancer.
Situation, right? If those two people are like in gym class together, right? Of course, the high school quarterback is like on the top of that social interaction, right? Looking at the sort of classic wolf pack model, they're the one who's sort of running the show, right? And the other guy's like hanging out in the bleachers,
Animals
talking to
high
his friends,
school,
right? Or talking to nobody because he's a beta in that situation, right? If you then take that kid and then you send that kid to like nationals, right, or whatever, and that kid, take the quarterback character,
bigger settings,
and he's suddenly like from the little podunk town, right?
Take him out of white supremacy. Take Babe Ruth out of the white league. Will he still be king?
Not from the big school. He's like way down on the totem pole, right? That person is no longer going to be in that high social
exactly.
hierarchy, right? And if you take that nerd and you put that, take that kid, maybe he's the dungeon master of his, Dungeons and Dragons group, right? That kid is going to be the alpha in that situation, right? That's how humans work. Humans aren't organized in sort of like little pods that stay together for life, and there's one person who's dominant the whole time, right? And that's the simple point that we.
This is another thing too. They throw out loosely these definitions. That's how humans work. So this is another key thing to keep in mind when you're listening to these conversations, when they talk about this stuff. That's how humans work. How the fuck could you say that's how humans work if you're not at all talking about the psychology that's been affecting them for hundreds of years? How the fuck could you know in any kind of way how humans work if you are consciously and subconsciously avoiding one of the biggest psychologies affecting many of the people, most of the people around the world, and how humans work? How the fuck can any of these so-called intellects on these podcasts have anything to say about how humans work when they consistently avoid the main psychology that affects how humans work.
Making in that piece, right?
And people got upset.
Yeah, people got upset because there are so many people who, we talked about this later on the show, there's this idea called the backfire effect, right? Where when people are told something that they don't agree with, that someone is told somebody a fact, when somebody is told a fact that contradicts like a really deeply held belief, it can often cause them to disbelieve it even when it's true, right? And fight back even harder.
Yeah.
One of the reasons that happens is because of an idea called identity protective cognition. It's if
Identity
the fact
protective
that
cognition
is being debunked is literally part of your identity, like if it's something that you believe really, really deeply, it's incredibly hard for you to disbelive it, right?
Racism, white supremacy
is like, Sean Hannity doesn't believe in climate change, right?
Really?
Well, you know what? I actually don't know that specifically what Sean Hannity thinks about climate change. So let's just say somebody who's made their whole career on climate change doesn't exist, right? All their friends are in the anti-climate change community, right? They met their wife at an anti-climate change fundraiser. You know what I mean? They make their money. They write a new anti-climate change book every year, right? Now, climate change is real, right?
Boom. So all the shit that he was talking about that you agreed with, now you're in chaos because now you don't agree with him about climate change. Like, this is the instability, the limbo space that the system wants you to be in. It's like, how the fuck? How am I supposed to think about this stuff? So this is the thing that's challenging for each and every individual, for you to think for your fucking self. Because as long as you keep following people, you're going to fall into this kind of shit. And then this is the thing. This is what I'm saying. You don't have to listen and believe everything that they're saying or all that other shit. What I'm saying is that know that all the other shit that you were meant to agree with that was said by these individuals was only there so that you could ultimately agree with what he just said right now. Climate change is real because that is the bigger lock-in. That's the bigger mind control. And that's how they get you. They talk about all these little things. Oh, yeah, I agree. That's right. He's smarter than Joe. That's right. Oh, yeah. And then, boom, you get to climate change, and they both agree with that shit. And now you realize that they're selling the same agenda. It don't matter what the fuck they're talking about. They're selling the same agenda because they're selling the same psychology of racism, white supremacy, because they're selling the same motives, the same story, the same talking points.
I could present that person with that is going to make them take the social risk.
And you can see the confidence that he has in there. Climate change is real. And when he doesn't have to validate, he doesn't have to add credibility. He doesn't have to validate that by saying anything else because the system of white supremacy has accepted Adam as a voice of authority and intellect in society. So he just has to say, what do you say? Shit. Kind of just like lost that whole snap. He just says climate change is real. End of story. Blah 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 blah. Let's see what he says. And then you believe
relationships, changing their whole life, right? Because if they were to say, okay, you know what? Actually, I'm convinced climate change is real. They would lose all their friends. Their wife would leave them. They would lose their revenue stream. They can't possibly come to that conclusion, right? And so they fight back so super hard, right? And so that's what ended up happening with that segment. There's a whole group of people who have built their whole lives on the idea there's alphas and betas. I'm an alpha. I'm not going to be a beta, right? And so, and maybe that meant something positive to them. You know, maybe they were in a bad place in their life, and through this model of alpha versus beta, they started working out, or they started, improving themselves a little bit, right? And maybe they started acting a little bit more confidently, and now they're in a relationship, right? All those things can be true with the idea of alphas and betas and humans not being scientific, right? But so when I tell them that, they fight back really hard. They're like, no, this is real, And so that video, which again, I had no idea that would be controversial, got the most YouTube response videos, got the most, furious things from it. And the weirdest thing was people started to say, this is political. Like, why is Adam Ruins Everything getting political? I'm like, I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
I have no idea.
I have no idea.
I have no idea how talking about climate change is political. I have no idea how avoiding white supremacy is political. How could you possibly think this is political?
It's political.
Alphas and betas are now political.
I mean, that's what people were saying. I guess, for some people it's become that, but because they see it as part of, like, I don't know, their whatever argument they're
white supremacy,
feminism or something like
no,
that.
not.
To me, I'm just like,
see, this is the same thing. I see. I haven't seen this part. I don't know. It must be something about feminism. Ha 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 ha. No, it's not about feminism. Just the same way they say, oh, women's rights are the same as black people's rights. No, it's way more complex when you're talking about racism and white supremacy. So the same way it's way more complex in that story. It's the same. It's way more complex in this story too. You're not wrong because you can't understand the alpha beta is. That discussion is a political discussion. It's not wrong because it has to deal with, women empowerment or something like that. It's wrong because you're not addressing racism, white supremacy. It ain't got shit to do with sexes. Like, if you want to downplay it and go into that story, yeah. But it is more about the power as a whole. This is why these fucking assholes are so oblivious to that discussion. I have no idea how the alpha beta discussion is political. I just told you how it's political. The big brain, we're smarter, white people are smarter, and going straight into the new world, the colonial agenda, genociding everybody. How the fuck is Adam completely oblivious to that discussion? See, that's another thing that makes you realize, and you're getting a little sweaty right now, so you can see it. These assholes know what they're doing.
guys, in dating, right, in life, like, this is not a real concept. If you want to say, I'm going to be confident tomorrow, I'm not going to tell you that's not going to help you out, you know? I'm a little bit reticent to make, like, a broad conclusion about evolutionary psychology, right? But I can tell you, again, go talk to any anthropologist, any biologist, any, sociologist. Is there such a thing as alpha males in humans?
In the strictest scientific sense of the word,
yeah, exactly.
I think they're looking at it in terms of, like, winners and losers, pushovers and people who get the job done, confident people versus people who are not.
See, pushovers and people who get the job done. Who are the pushovers to the power grid? The indigenous people. They were the nice ones who allowed the colonists, the fucking invaders. They were the so-called pushovers. That's how this fucking thing is political. That's why these assholes won't talk about it. Because it makes them the superheroes to be alphas. Because the other people are pushovers. But they won't mention that. He'll say that again. Let's hear he says that again.
Humans.
In the strictest scientific sense of the word.
Yeah, exactly.
I think they're looking at it in terms of, like, winners and losers, pushovers and people who get the job done.
And losers. He's talking about the scientists, evolutionary biologists.
People versus people who are not confident. But I think you're correct, and I think obviously humans operate on a giant spectrum. And if you start going around saying alpha and beta, and the idea that all alphas are the same or all betas are the same, it's just as ridiculous as the idea of saying all Democrats are the same or all Republicans. It becomes an ideology.
You see how he has to go back to neutral now? Because he's so fucking stupid and has not a thought in his own brain.
With, like, overconfident men's rights guys.
Yeah.
Because I'm like...
This is the alchemy of Joe Rogan. He plays the extremes of the systematic psychology. And he plays that hard. And then he submits to whoever has a deeper mainstream psychology. He adjusts. So what happens is everybody falls in that in-between space of, I don't know how to think, so I'll just think about, I'll just be in that middle ground where Joe Rogan is. So I'll just think like Adam. I'll side more like with Adam because now Joe is on his side now. So this is how they are fakely evolving their dumb ass people who are followers of Joe Rogan. That by playing Joe Rogan as the dumbass monkey-minded idiot, this is this illusion of intellectual evolution. The illusion of intellectual evolution through Joe Rogan no longer defending that out-of-date ass fucking mentality. And it's not only out of date, to be taken more to the extreme. It's not out of date. It's perfectly up to date, and it's not so much that it's out of date. It's more so that it is It is a system of RWS. It's not out of date. It's the origins of RWS, which is the same thing.
Listen, we have all the rights.
Yeah.
Like, fucking settle down.
Yeah,
Just
we got enough of them.
I had a whole bit about it. I was like, it's like divorce laws, and that's it.
Yeah.
Everything else is stacked in our favor.
Yeah.
Just fucking chill out. You're making us look bad.
Well,
Bullshit. All that. All that for what? Nothing? All that bullshit. All that back and forth. And then, like, what? You gotta ask yourself, what? Why did Joe Rogan go through all those emotions only to just, you know, submit to... Was he completely oblivious to what Adam was saying? Or was it a show? Is this a show? Was this designed to be that way? When it's clipped out like this, it seems more like a show. It seems more like the intention was, just like I said, to have this fake version of evolution around the so-called leader of thought. And Joe Rogan is that leader of that thought. And that's as far as it goes. By the time this clip is over, you're still stuck in that place where they left you. And you haven't thought about anything deeper than those discussions. They very slickly set up a trap of the alpha beta discussion that keeps you ingrained in that. And like I said, the discussion is already in your scene. They're talking about relationships. Everybody has relationship stories. You can relate on that in some kind of way. You've engaged in the idea of alpha and beta males out there. So this is relevant to you in some kind of way, but you just don't know how yet. So, yeah, I just wanted to do this. Hopefully the video is still running. I just wanted to share this piece real quick. And yeah, I couldn't not share this because this is a really, really good. I might do another follow-up. I'm gonna check out these other videos of what they're talking about, but maybe not, because basically that's the same kind of way that this interaction was between Adam and Joe. It's gonna be like all the other ones. And like I said, it's not about what they're talking about and who these individuals are. It's more so about how they're talking to each other and why they're talking about what they're talking about. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for the support. And until next time, from all my relations, peace, love, and harmony.